to set the stage for all this, I want to talk about something that is a topic that's front of mind for a lot of people these days, because it's called high resolution audio. We've been living with the CD for a long time, and record companies would love to have you buy all the things that you bought all over again, because they apparently are unaware that streaming exists. So they've been pushing this thing called high resolution audio, of like super high sample rates and bit resolution and all that. I've done a lot of projects at 96 kHz sample rate, classical projects mostly, and working with like really fine musicians with great ears that hadn't been destroyed by mixing in front of house for the last decade. And they could not tell the difference. If I recorded something at 96 kHz, they could not tell the difference between playing it back at 96 kHz or sample rate converting it to 44.1 and playing it back. I mean, no one could tell in anything better than a random distribution. So I thought, well, this is probably just ridiculous stuff. Why do we need high resolution audio? Well, clearly we don't. No one can tell the difference. So the New Music Seminar asked me to come and be on a panel where I could be the voice of reason to counter all the people who are saying, yes, you have to reinvest in all this new gear and buy everything all over again. So I decided to come up with some audio examples to prove my point. And in the process of coming up with the audio examples, I found out that I was actually wrong, and that there are circumstances where a higher sample rate makes a big difference. But it's not the ones they want you to think makes a big difference. And we'll get into that at the end. But first I want to talk about high resolution audio in general and why I say so what. Because we're here to make music, right? We're here to record audio, but ultimately what we want to do is have an emotional impact on people. I mean, isn't that what music's all about? At least it was last time I learned. So let's get a sense of perspective here before we carry on much further. Okay, why do we want high-res audio? That's what the record companies want you to think. Because we'll get perfect sound forever. Except there's only one problem with that. That perfect sound forever was the way that they introduced the CD. So now they're saying, but we really mean it this time. Honest, we do. But this begs an interesting question. Here they are trying to tell us that this high-resolution stuff is what we need, and yet, what about vinyl? Why do people think vinyl sounds better? If you talk to some of the hip people out there, they'll say, oh yeah, vinyl just sounds a lot better. They may not have actually ever played it. There was an interesting survey in England that said that 50% of the albums that people bought had never been played. They bought it for different reasons, which is actually very significant. So why do people think vinyl sounds better? Well, I file it under, I want to believe. They want to believe that vinyl sounds better. But let's look at what vinyl actually does, because a lot of people do not check out the dark underbelly of how vinyl records are made. First thing is, when it's being put on the disc, there's an RIA curve that gives 20 dB of boost at the high end and cuts by 20 dB at the low end. And the reason for going into vinyl with that kind of a cut is that vinyl is making grooves. And if you have a lot of bass on there, those grooves are big, the needle will jump out of it, and you'll get no level out of it. You'll have like an album with like 3 minutes of songs on it, and the needle will jump out. So the vinyl cannot cope with really low frequencies, so they cut the low frequencies. On the other hand, it can deal with the high frequencies, so the high frequencies are boosted. All right? So already, this is what we're starting off with. But then, of course, on the way coming out of the vinyl, we have to do something equal and opposite, which is we got to boost the bass up to compensate for the fact that it was cut, and cut the treble to compensate for the fact that it was boosted. And this was all done with like analog circuitry, of course, which, as we all know, is like extremely precise and surgical. So you would see these reviews about RIAA phono preamps, and some reviewer would say, I used the Blurful XYZ100 and it revealed sounds I had never heard before. Well, the reason why they never heard the sounds before is because it had a different frequency response from what they'd listened to before. Because there was all kinds of ripple and passband and issue with those filters. I mean, that's 20 dB, man. That's like a significant amount of filtering that's going on. So we're already starting off with that. So let's look at what the technology behind vinyl actually is. With vinyl, we drag a rock through yards of plastic. We do EQ abuse on the way in. We hope we can do equal and opposite EQ abuse on the way out, but of course we can't. And we enjoy the record deteriorating a bit every time you listen to it. What could possibly go wrong? So, for those who say vinyl is the future, I think the answer is nope. I don't think it is. I really don't think it is. I don't think it sounds better. I just don't. Sorry. I don't. Although it does reveal sounds I've never heard before. But let's not forget its lessons, because they matter. This is why vinyl is important. Vinyl celebrates music with art, with ritual, with speakers, and with friends. By this I mean, there's the art, there's the album art, there's the fold-out, there's the beautiful artwork that goes into making these things. Those people who bought the albums but never played them, they put them up on their walls because they're just beautiful. Well, at least a lot of them. With a ritual, the cleaning of the disc, the placing of the tone arm, all those things happen. With speakers, if you're going to play vinyl, you're not going to be able to play them through the $2 earbuds. You know, you're not going to be able to play them through a phone that's sitting in your pocket. You're going to have to listen to them on speakers that actually move air, which is the way real music works. Real music moves air. And in fact, if real music didn't move air, you would be out of a job because your microphones would have no purpose. They have to catch the air moving. So, I mean, air is an important part of this thing. And it also tends to be a social thing. Back in the 60s, it was very common for people to put on albums and listen to them with their friends. I remember those days. Yes, it was really something. And the other thing is that, okay, so now we have streaming. Let's compare streaming to vinyl. So you go to iTunes, and this is what you see. Does this have soul? I mean, it looks pretty boring to me. I mean, it kind of looks like if spreadsheets came to life as music. That's what they would look like. But if you go think about vinyl, now you're talking about soul. Here we are in a nice Memphis record store, and you know, you're looking for your Al Green album, and the guy next to you is looking for Cal Tjader or something. You start talking about music. That's not going to happen on iTunes. You're not going to have a conversation with your computer. I also have a scene from a diorama at the Smithsonian of life in the mid-20th century. Actually, it's Happy Days. And you'll see that they're by a jukebox. The jukebox is playing vinyl. It is moving air. They're listening to music, and they are not wearing headphones. People used to listen to music through actual speakers. So taking that into account, so what is the future? Well, some people will tell you that it's convenience, that it's cheap, easy to carry around, sounds fine, even with data omission. By the way, I do want to correct a concept that MP3s and data compressed formats like that, people call them data compression. I think data omission is a much more accurate term because it throws stuff out. So what musical experience are we giving people? Think about that for a second. Back in the day, again, big studios, fancy speakers, nice microphones, big mixers, mixing as a performance, playing back through stereo systems that people paid a lot of money for in their homes. But these days, Devo was right, we have de-evolved. We have vintage German tube microphones that cost $12,000. We have multi-million-dollar recording facilities. They go down to a $1.99 MP3 or maybe 99 cents, and they end up on $12 earbuds. So all that effort that goes into getting things right at the source has a lot of difficulties it has to go through on the way. Now, this isn't to say that it's not worth getting the best sound possible, because when it goes through all this garbage, the less, you know, even though it goes through all this violence, if you start off with something good, it's going to end up sounding better. So, I'm talking about the earbuds there, but check this out. Actually, the Apple earbuds aren't so bad compared to Beats headphones. Beats are the red frequency response curve, the Apple earbuds are the blue. I mean, it's kind of like shocking, but, or think of all the people who listen to music on laptops, okay? That's even worse. This is like a typical laptop, and I said, don't blame Sony, because we're trying to violate the laws of physics here by making sound come out of something that's like this big, okay? A Bosendorfer 9-foot grand. There's a reason why those low strings are 9 feet. Those are low cycles. They have to move a lot of air. A laptop speaker just can't do that, so you get a lot of high frequencies. Or cheap headphones. These are like the kind that you pick up at, you know, Walgreens or something like that. It makes a nice relief map of the Alps, but as far as frequency response is concerned, it's just not happening, you know? So, and then the absolute worst thing in the modern music listening world is this tool of Satan called signal enhancements. If you have a laptop with your signal enhancement things checked, it's not the fault of the laptop. That thing is checked. I was doing some mastering. I was like traveling in Europe and I had my laptop and I didn't have speakers and things like that. And I was listening to some of the stuff that I'd mastered and I played it back and I'm like listening to it. I'm going, this sounds horrible. What was I thinking? What state was I in when I mastered this stuff? My God, it's awful. And I thought, I was really starting to question my choice of careers. And then I found that, and audio enhancements had been enabled. And just to translate, audio enhancement means compress the living daylights out of the dynamic range and add a lot of treble, okay, into your laptop, which already has enough treble to like kill small animals. So, yeah, anyway, that's just, watch for that stuff because it's really bad. So this brings up the question, how the hell can I mix a song and have it sound decent? Because look at what it has to go through. So the answer must be high resolution audio, right? No. So what? You do this high resolution stuff and it's coming out of these earbuds and these bad speakers and stuff. It's so much for garbage in, garbage out. Now it's anything in, garbage out. So what are we going to do? So I wouldn't come here just to bring you down if I didn't have some kind of solution, right? Okay. So let's get into some of the ways to counteract this. First of all, don't kid yourself. High resolution audio is not the answer. It's a piece of the answer, but it's not the answer. It helps to have high resolution audio. It helps to record with the best sound possible. It helps to have good microphones. But the real answer is music as an experience. That is what people like about vinyl. People like the experience of vinyl. They like holding things in their hands. They like the air moving. They like that kind of thing. And that experience has to start with us. Because we care enough to create change. At least I hope we do. So what do we do? Well, one thing, this is a post in one of my forums where I talked about upsampling, which we'll talk about shortly, and where the person agreed that yes, there is a way where high resolution audio can make an obvious, big, notable change that improves the quality of the music. But there are other things we can do. A mix can be a performance. So many times these days I go into the studio and someone has the faders set at a particular place. And it's like, are you going to move those? Well, no, I have automation. Okay, so what's your automation doing? Fading in, fading out, doing something like that. One of the best experiences of my formative years was when I was doing session work for Columbia Records in New York. And I got to work with a lot of really, really great engineers. And I saw the record Brandy being mixed. It was a song by Looking Glass. It was a big hit back in the early 70s. Sailors Say Brandy, you're a fine girl. You ever heard that song? So I was watching the guy mixing it. He had 8 faders. This was before the days of like 4 billion tracks all synchronized together. And as he was mixing it, he had his eyes closed. He had 4 fingers on 4 faders, 4 fingers on the other faders, and he was constantly moving them just very subtly. He was constantly making little rhythmic changes, pushing the song, pulling it back, pushing it, making the drums a little more. He was adding all these nuances. And it made that song come alive. It made the mix come alive. And that was a very common technique in those days. Even on the big consoles, a lot of times, you'd have like 6, 8 hands on the console, moving faders, flicking switches, changing pan positions, sweeping the EQ a little bit for a solo or whatever. It became part of the performance. It became part of the music. It became part of the experience. And when you go back and listen to some of these, quote, classic records, unquote, I don't think it has anything to do with the fact that they had tube preamps. I think it had to do with the fact that they were treating music as a performance, and also musicians were together in the room playing together and playing off of each other, and also the tempo was varying. And let's talk about that for a second. Tempos can change. Yes, they can. I cannot tell you how many sessions I've gone into where I say, can I look at the tempo track? And it's flatlined. Now, we all know what flatlining is. And that's what it does to your music. Real musicians speed up, slow down, breathe, pause, wait, do interesting things. If you look at, very interesting, I did some analysis of drummers. Steve Gadd is probably one of the most revered session musicians on the planet. he can actually control when he hits that cymbal within 3 milliseconds. He'll like lead it 3 milliseconds ahead of the beat just to make it so that it pushes the song a little bit more. On the other hand, you have someone like John Bonham. John Bonham, everybody goes, oh yeah, biggest drum sound ever. Well, what made it a big drum sound? Well, there was ambience recording, but also he would always hit the kick right on the beat. I mean, right on the beat, and the snare was always a fraction of a second late. So it was like, dum, dum, da, dum, dum, da. There was just a little bit of a hesitation. Well, through centuries of genetic engineering, our brains associate delay with distance. So that's like a really important factor. So when we hear that, we go, oh gosh, that's really big. And also our ears are most concerned about the first few milliseconds of a sound. So, and of course that comes from like wondering whether the wind rustling behind you or the leaves rustling behind you is the wind, or maybe a saber-toothed tiger looking for fast food, right? So we're very attuned to that. And one of the things I found, for example, is suppose you have bass and kick hitting at the same time. If you want the melody to predominate, slide the bass just a few milliseconds ahead of the kick. If you want the rhythm to predominate, slide the bass a few milliseconds behind the kick, because what your ear hears first is the most important thing you'll hear. So anyways, that's about tempos. The other thing is sausage mastering must die. Dynamics create emotional impact. And so many times, I do a lot of mastering. I've mastered hundreds and hundreds of tracks. And a lot of times people be like, yeah, we want to win the loudest words, make it as loud as you possibly can. And I'm like, okay, so I do that, but then I also master it the way I would like to hear it. And I play it for people, and almost invariably, not every time, but almost all the time, they end up going for the version with more dynamics. We're adults. We can turn up the volume control if we want it louder, okay? We don't have to like squash the crap out of it. As a matter of fact, one of the things that I've often promised that if elected president, I will ask for a squash control to be put on all consumer electronics. And so that people can squash the thing themselves. We'll master it the way we want with like dynamics and a full range, but if someone's vacuuming or in the car, they can turn up the squash control and have it be squashed within an inch of its life. You know? So that we got to get rid of the sausage mastering. So how do we get people to think of music as an experience? Well, one thing is education. Even though the Pono is kind of like a weird device and didn't really take off, it at least got people thinking about the subject of, are we really satisfied with the kind of musical experience we're getting now? Or someone like Trent Reznor from 9 Inch Nails, I think he's a freaking genius. The way he started doing streaming, the way he wanted to do it. It's a question of getting people to go, no, you don't have to settle for MP3 with earbuds. There are alternatives. But then ultimately, really, there's only one question that matters in all the work that we do with audio and all the things we do with recording. Are we here to make high-resolution audio or high-resolution music? What's the most important thing? So, there you go.
Let's get cracking.
Thank you.